The chair is Joanne Muller, and she joins me in the studio. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Is there a demand for this, do you think?
Well, that's what we're going to try and find out, Richard. There certainly is a demand in other states and territories of Australia. ACT and South Australia, for instance, only offer renewable tenure grave sites. And so here in New South Wales, despite the fact that the legislation has provided for renewables since 2012, it hasn't been offered before. And so we're really wanting to hear from our communities as to whether or how they would like this to work.
And is it available? Excuse me for coughing. Is it available at all at the moment?
Not in Sydney. It's not, Richard. Despite the fact that the legislation, provided for it, it hasn't been implemented by any of the cemeteries here in Sydney. And so we're really looking for ways in which we can expand the life of the two cemeteries, as you've rightly pointed out, our southern metropolitan cemetery areas. So we're looking at a number of different ways, and one of those is renewables. But we really want to consult our communities first before we do a pilot.
There's some evidence that things like, the traditional coffin might actually be quite bad for the environment.
Oh, it absolutely is. You're right on that, Richard. The traditional coffin has all sorts of lacquer and toxins which actually are not very biodegradable. In fact, we need permission from the Department of Health to bury in a biodegradable coffin. And so whenever you do bury in a coffin, there will be a certain amount of toxins from that coffin that will remain there. And if a person has been embalmed, which, that is the family's choice, then there are also other chemicals which will remain in the soil.
I mean, it seems such a shame because in a way, a human body should be an advantage for the environment. It's full of nutrients, isn't it? Like any compostable thing.
Absolutely, it is. And, the old ashes to ashes. Yes, returning to the earth and returning all the nutrients that you've borrowed in your lifetime would be the ideal.
Let me give the number. You might have seen some of this happening overseas. You might have just read about some of the experiments that people are having with more sustainable burials. Burials just in something like a bag, so it's going to rot away, and it might be under a tree. They're doing this, I think, in places like the UK. Maybe you've heard about some of these ideas. Would you like it? Or is there something you think that is lovely about the more traditional way with the headstone and the coffin and all of that? 1300 222 702. Joanne Muller is here from the Southern Metropolitan Cemeteries, New South Wales. Because the headstone is another issue, isn't it? Because that's, polished granite and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, that also doesn't degrade as quickly as you would expect. And in fact, families like to preserve them. And it is a barrier to reusing a plot. We have a project called Families Unite, which we are looking to find the descendants of the original owners of a grave site and actually see if their descendants, if they've got the, if they're entitled to the ownership, if they would like to reuse that. Some of our burials, as you've mentioned, are from the late 1800s. And so there will be no remains probably left in that site, and the family could reuse it. And it's quite a nice way of keeping the generations together.
We're talking to Joanne Muller. What's your view? 1300 222 702. Here's Gwen from Baulkham Hills. Hi, Gwen.
Hi, how are you going?
Yeah, good. Your view about all of this?
Well, I have relatives in Holland, and what they do, say my cousin, a few years ago she died, and what happened, they cremate the person and then they go to this set area where it's like a park, or not a park, but a beautiful nature area. People can go there, they spread the ashes. There's no headstones or anything, but you know where your loved one's ashes have been spread. And every year they can go back, they can have a picnic, they can have a glass of wine, etc. This is the way I would love to go. No headstone, no grave, no coffin like that. I just want to be back in the environment.
Doing good rather than harm.
That's right. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful, you know. So I hope that Sydney goes this way as well.
Gwen, thank you very much. Joanne, have you heard about that sort of project?
Oh, yes, Richard. We actually offer that already. Families can actually purchase a garden and the whole family's ashes can be scattered there. And we do often have families coming and having a picnic and a celebration. Sometimes it's annually, sometimes it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas in particular.
Okay, but that's when you've been to the crematorium. There's lots of people, often for religious reasons, where that's not an option. They've got to be buried, don't they?
Yes, that's correct. There are a number of faith-based and just personal preference as well.
Penelope's here from Alexandria. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I think cardboard coffins for a start.
Yes.
No brass rubbish, none of the handles, none of your nonsense like that. Perfectly plain cardboard coffin, maybe with a name on it, and then it can be buried. And then if you want to have walls anywhere, you can put all the names of all the people on the wall.
All right, cardboard coffin. I mean, it is weird in a way that we put this sort of, beautifully lacquered timber and precious things like brass handles, and we put them in the ground. What's the point of that?
Well, really, I agree with you, Richard. We don't really need it. The trouble, I think, with the cardboard is if you are just using it as the ordinary burial and you're not reusing the land, actually natural burial, which is what your caller is talking about, actually is quite land hungry. And we're looking to renew land.
Okay, why is it land hungry?
Because if you're not going to reuse it, it's definitely more environmentally friendly to use cardboard or wicker or just a cloth, a shroud. But unless you're going to reuse that land, you will very quickly use up all your burial land.
Okay, so there are kind of two issues, isn't there? There's the reuse, is that appropriate to reuse? And then there's the issue of the method of burial. I've heard about, I think it's the UK where I've heard about this most commonly, but you're buried in something like a Hessian bag, something like that, cotton bag, under a tree and there'll be a big paddock with lots of trees in there and lots of people buried underneath them. That sounds pretty sustainable, doesn't it?
Oh, it is very sustainable, Richard. But once you've buried and you've planted the tree, and in fact there's beautiful forests. I think there's one in Sweden where they bury naturally in a shroud. They then plant a tree and the tree grows, but that land is not reused. And so you probably can end up with a lovely forest, but you're going to run out of land fairly quickly.
Jackie's here from Sydney. Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
Yeah, what would you like?
Well, I would love to become some sort of a human fertilizer and, make the soil rich. And I've got no objection to that. I know that, for a lot of people, it means a big shift in terms of, what they value or traditions. But I'm all for it.
You'd quite like for people to look up and see that new leaf on the tree and think that's a bit of Jackie.
Oh, that brings tears to my eyes. I would love that concept. I would love to know that in some way I contributed to, improving the climate, improving plant growth. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, you're not cutting down a tree to make a coffin, but actually growing a tree might be a better approach. Jackie, thank you so much. Here's Peter. Good afternoon, Peter.
G'day, Richard. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Now, you manage a couple of graveyards.
Yeah, so the church that I've just started working for the church at the beginning of the year, and they've got two different sites, one with a sort of converted church and one where I live on site. Both have graveyards, and both of those graveyards require a considerable amount of maintenance. So I think that's another thing to consider. If we have to have somebody on a mower, sitting there on a mower, every week during summer and spring, that's another sort of environmental cost to think about. I think people being buried, under trees or something like that would be a much better proposition.
Okay, so the idea of the graveyard, the mowers, the little wicker fence around the thing, all of that is part of the problem, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we as Christians believe in Jesus. We believe there's a physical resurrection. So the grave it's a nice thing. I know a lot of families like that, but in the end, the person's gone and they're going to come again. But it's not a real thing. It's just something we fixate on and doesn't really help us, I don't think.
Do you think people should, obviously, we're not telling people of faith what to think,
No.
but do you think the case for cremation should be put, more firmly by the various faiths?
Well, I know that I'm a sort of Protestant, and I know that most people that I speak to are quite happy with cremation. In fact, it's people from the local community that I'm in or from outside who are not part of our church who want to bury their families here or continue the tradition of that. People within the faith that I know, Christians, are quite happy just to be cremated.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it, Peter? Yes, I think about the mowing and all of that. I guess you'd be nodding to that, Joanne.
Yes, there is a lot of maintenance, but really it comes down to the personal preference of the families. And there are some families who do prefer a burial, and to them being able to access that gravesite is very important. And so we have got an obligation to maintain access for those families.
Okay, but what about virtual headstones? This is from Anna on the text. I've heard of burial in a special garden or a site with a virtual headstone. So you can find the burial site with a phone, easy as that, but you don't have that use of all the stone and all of that.
Yes, we're working on that, Richard, actually. There's even the concept of having a hologram or a message left by your loved one when you get into Bluetooth zone, and you'll actually see a hologram message from them.
Okay, I thought I could just be a scarecrow working in the Riverina in the fruit industry. That was my plan. David's here. Hi, David.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, this is about your mum.
Yes. My mum died a few years ago back in the UK, and she'd always sort of been very much anti-funerals, no fuss, no nonsense. And we had her buried in what will become a woodland cemetery. At the moment, it's sort of agricultural land which hasn't been used, which has been repurposed as a natural cemetery. And when it's full, which I think there's something like 30,000 available plots, the land will get turned over to National Trust, and it will be a forest nature reserve forever.
And for you,
so she was buried in a shroud. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for you as the son, that it sounds like you find those ideas very appealing.
It was absolutely perfect. It's I say if I was back in the UK, that's probably what I would choose. But it's exactly what she wanted. So there was no fuss, no coffin, just a simple shroud. And yeah, it ticked all the boxes.
Yeah, well, it sounds like maybe that will be available for those of us in Australia. Thank you for that. Thane is here from Marrickville. Hi, Thane.
Hi, Richard.
Yeah, good. Burials.
Yeah, I've long thought this was a better idea. I'd be happy to be cremated, and I don't care so much. But if people need to be buried intact, why not use a post hole digger, a great big one, drill a hole in the ground, put them in a cardboard tube, sit them in there and plant a tree on top of it. And there's your memorial.
Well, what if you're a retail worker and you've spent your whole life on your feet?
I don't think you're going to feel it, mate, after that.
Maybe that's right. Hey,
You're not going to be tired, but I think it will take up an awful lot less space.
Well, it sure would.
We'd end up with forest.
Yeah, let me ask Joanne about that. Why do we bury, horizontally? Why not bury vertically?
Well, I think it comes down to the safety of using the site again. Most of the burial sites that we offer are at least for a double interment. Some of them are actually triple. And so it's really the safety of the workers when you're coming to bury. However, the idea of having a forest is absolutely amazing. If we were given a piece of agricultural land today, we could, with the right planning approvals, we could be starting our forest immediately. Wouldn't it be lovely to be looking at a radiator pine or a eucalypt forest and be thinking that was your loved one there? So absolutely.
Okay, I still don't quite get why we can't do it vertically. I mean, he mentions the post digger, which is absolutely right. We do this all the time on farms. You just get a big drill and create that sort of size shape?
I think it's to do with the safety. I'm the chair of the board, so I'm not really all that operational, but I have explored that with the staff, and as I understand it, it's something to do with the safety of digging one close by and the space that's
maybe
required.
you're going to get collapse, wall collapses if you dig that deeply. If you dig, because presumably this is all a very gruesome topic, but if you've got a 6-foot body, then you've got to get a 10-foot grave or a 12-foot grave. That is starting to get quite deep, I suppose.
Yes, there is a minimum burial height, which is currently 900 mil.
All right. We will see how you go investigating all these ideas, and maybe, we'll have some of those things which, it sounds like they're doing elsewhere. We should be doing it here.
Yes, we'd love to hear from your listeners.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. There's Joanne Muller. She's chair of the Southern Metropolitan Cemeteries, New South Wales, and they're keen for ideas for people who think we can be doing this stuff better. Maybe you've heard of some of the traditions overseas, or they do sound like they're experimenting with some of them here already. You're listening to ABC Radio Sydney.